All right, stud. How you doing, Cole?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Duane?
I'm doing well. We don't have Scott today. He's off doing softball because it's beautiful weather out there, and so got to either be playing softball or doing golf. One of those two things right now because it's such a beautiful day out there. But so we miss Scott, but you and I are going to try and hold up our end. And
We'll do the best we can here.
see if we can do it. Yeah, it is good to see you. What's going on in your life?
Just a lot of fun stuff happening around, and just continue to do the best we can to advocate for this new math framework and really roll it down to teachers in our area. So, what about you?
That was very nondescript. At first, you're like, oh, there's a lot of fun stuff around. That's like very, I don't know, like mafia or something.
Right?
Like
It's like,
crows.
do they really want to know?
You
Oh,
know, things are doing well on my side. My team is working their butt off as we kind of wrap up working with all of our districts and all of our school sites. And today I did a school site. I introduced two different teachers to the counting collection
cool.
routine, and they were like mind blown. And so they said they're definitely going to be doing it next year, starting at the beginning of the year. They brought me in at the end of the year just so that they can get a sense of what is this thing that you've been talking about. Now they have an idea and they're going to think about doing it for real over the summer. And so
So,
got a couple
along
of converts.
Yeah. So on with counting collections, I had a moment this morning where I was a proud husband as I saw my wife leaving the house with two different puzzles that my kids don't play with anymore, and I'm like, "Why are you taking puzzles to class?" For my counting collections. And so she's gonna go be breaking. So anyway, so super excited that that has kind of taken off in her classroom as well, and she loves it. So it's good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
One of the teachers I worked with today, we had a little bit of a miscommunication, and I thought I was just coming in to help her with her counting collection, whatever collection she already had. Well, she thought I was going to bring a wheelbarrow full of stuff to count. And so we had a little bit of a miscommunication. But as I kind of was occupying the kids for a couple of seconds, we just grabbed things from her room. We had books, pencils, erasers, popsicle sticks, cubes, and we created a collection for, I think she had 20 kids. Created, I think we did 10 collections because the kids worked in pairs in a matter of minutes. So, I mean, for teachers who want to do counting collections, technically speaking, it doesn't take more than 2 minutes of prep time. Just grab 10 piles of crap and get ready for their kids to count. It was, and broken puzzles, like
Right.
puzzles with missing pieces, is a perfect example of just crud that you could just arrange for kids to count.
Yeah. So anyway, I was a proud for a moment on the way. Without any coaching, that happened. So it's
That
great.
is fantastic. That you're like, woohoo. Well, speaking of other proud things, we recently had a webinar and we already posted it. So it's already in our podcast feed, but you want to talk about it?
Yeah, so we had Dan Meyer last week. It was really fun. It was really all about student engagement and motivation, which I think is going to kind of tail into some of the things we're going to talk about more in depth here today. But it really took me back to about 15 years ago when his math class needs a makeover,
Yeah.
and kind of his spin on some of the things that he did then with just a generic problem in a textbook and removing all of the graphs and the slope for the ski lift problem. But then he did that with an example with rectangular prisms.
Yep.
And I was reminded how simple some of the decisions that he made to make it just more open and engaging for kids, like just whiting out the numbers, or I don't even know how he did it, but he somehow wrapped a box, one of the prisms, but it made it look like a cereal box, like out of nowhere. I'm like, one, that's really cool, but my brain completely thought completely different as soon as I saw that, and just how it's got to be easy. Like, right, how easy is it to do some of these things uh, to give kids a different entry point into some of these problems and not make it feel so mundane all the time with the same repetitive over. So it was really exciting. And we had about 70 people consistently on that webinar last week. And so it was great.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I wasn't there at the actual webinar, but I did listen to it afterwards. And, this idea of how do you invite students in? And I was thinking about it being kind of a matter of addition through subtraction. It was, how do you get kids sucked in? Well, you don't have to add anything. Maybe you use that white rectangle to hide the title, hide the fact that we're looking for surface area, hide the fact that we could look at example 1 to mimic what we're supposed to do. It's like it was addition through subtraction. And by subtracting those things, all of a sudden, even I, as the learner, got sucked in. It's so easy. Oh, I don't have to add anything to get my kids engaged. Maybe I can subtract things. And I just thought that was
Yeah.
fantastic.
And genius, right? And super simple. We can all do that. It's as a way to bring kids into problems we already have. You don't have to go find new stuff, things you already have. So I thought it was great.
Yep.
So it was super exciting. Yeah.
Now, as the teacher, they have to, when you block out the fact that we're supposed to be doing surface area,
Right.
Now, as the teacher is now inviting kids in, we've created space where the kids are going to talk about stuff other than what we wanted them to talk about. Right now, our lesson says secretly we're supposed to be doing surface area, but if the kids talk about volume, we as the teacher have to kind of have the wherewithal, the MKT, the math knowledge for teaching, to think about, okay, where does what that kid just brought in, where does that sit? Did we already talk about it? Will we be talking about it soon? Do I want to put my today's lesson aside because volume is also equally valuable in this particular grade level? Like, there's a lot of instant thinking that the teacher is going to have to do when we basically add by subtracting. When we kind of invite the kids in, I may have to do some, and ideally I would have anticipated this stuff ahead of time. Like, what will I say if the kids want to talk about volume? Am I willing to put my surface area lesson aside so that we could talk about volume? Or do I want to artfully have some phrase planned in advance so that I can tell the kid, hold on to that thought. We're going to talk about that brilliant idea next week. It requires a little bit of anticipation and a whole lot of MKT.
Yeah, but just think how beautiful though it is that if students are bringing that up and what was going to be a surface area lesson, like how easy it's going to be to start having those connections between volume and surface area down the road.
Yeah.
Right, because we can bring back those same problems and just help them start naturally making those connections.
Yeah.
I've seen some classrooms where teachers will just chart all the great things kids say they want to talk about and say, you know what, today though, it's just going to be this one thing, but those are all great ideas and those become your future lessons.
Right.
Yeah.
Create a notice and wonder chart. And so the kids are noticing, the kids are wondering, and that wondering becomes like your lesson plans for the next week or so. Because a lot of those wonders are wonderful wonders. Some of them are dumb. I wonder why they're all blue. Okay. All right. Well, but we're going to honor the kids' thinking. We're going to document that, maybe if it was genuine, and document that kid's thinking. And a lot of those wonders can become future lessons. You're right. You're right. Well, that actually kind of, that kind of covers what we were supposed to talk about. So last episode that we recorded, not the Dan webinar, but the last episode, we introduced the idea of the 3 dimensions of systemic change that support mathematics instruction, because we know the results that we're getting in terms of student achievement is kind of stinky, and we're not going to change the results if we just keep doing what we continually have always done. So we need to change. But just saying, all right, everybody, just change, you can't just do that. So we have to. So in our chapter 2 of the math framework, the new California math framework, they identify the 3 dimensions, 3 things that teachers can be thinking about in terms of, okay, what am I supposed to change and how might I change? Last week, we talked about an assets-based approach to instruction. This time around, we're going to spend 5 or 6 minutes talking about active engagement through investigation and connection. We've already started that
Yeah.
because you know darn well anything Dan is going to talk about, it's going to feed right into that. So, and then our next time, we're going to wrap up the three things with cultural and personal relevance. I've been reading up. I can't wait. This is going to be good. So as we think about active engagement through investigation and connection, anything hit you?
So I'm actually going to go back to how Dan opened last week, and he highlighted there were two things to think about when you think about inviting kids in: curriculum and pedagogy. And how do you intentionally do those two things well so that all kids feel like they have access and are welcomed into the environment? And so as I was thinking about investigations and connections, like how are we bringing in and starting with an investigation, maybe where we don't know all the math that we are going to need to know to solve it, but we have some outside experiences that we could start making those connections and then kind of carry these problems. Like it doesn't have to be done in a 30-minute sitcom type experience,
Yeah.
right? We could have these bigger investigations where we're learning kind of math along the way, where eventually we're going to come to some resolution. But it's okay to have this weird discomfort feeling kind of in the middle, this ambiguous feeling, because that's what math people do. You know, the professional mathematicians, they're never just sit down 1 hour later, I'm done with the problem I was working on.
You know, I love the fact that you called it a sitcom, because I literally, with the teachers I teach, when we're talking about how are we designing our lesson, I say we need to stop thinking about designing a lesson like it's an episode of Friends with a beginning, a middle, and an end, right, tied up neatly in 43 minutes. We need to think about teaching like it's a soap opera, and it's a story, and we're telling the story, and it's okay to leave on a particular day with a cliffhanger, and it's okay for a particular day or two for the kids to just be spending that time grasping and thinking and collecting data, but not really knowing where it's going. It's like the first two chapters of a novel that you're reading. You know, you're reading, you're reading about a backstory, and you're reading about the characters, and you're like, but the cover says there's supposed to be a lot of fire and shooting, but right now there's no fire and there's no shooting. Well, sometimes you got to get the story going a little bit.
Well, and just kind of thinking about how is the thinking going to continue beyond the walls of your classroom when you do experiences like that, right? If it ends at the end of your period, the bells ring and it's done, well, the thinking stops there too. Like, how can we extend the thinking where that, what's keeping you up at night? Oh, it's that math problem I really want to solve and come back and talk to you about tomorrow because I've been thinking about it, right? And how do we we always say, how do we have more time?
Right.
Well, we have more time by making them motivated to stay engaged with it beyond our time.
Yeah. Now, because our podcast is called Math on the Rocks, I'm gonna bring in some rockiness here.
Yeah.
So this idea of inquiry versus direct instruction, and people on the anti-inquiry side, they claim that what we're saying is like the equivalent of, to teach a kid how to swim, you just throw them in the deep end of the pool and hope they don't drown. And that's a bunch of baloney. So what we're saying with inquiry is we're giving kids a moment to think. We're giving them a moment to demonstrate what they're thinking about, what they know, what they don't know, what they notice, what they wonder. We're not throwing them into the deep end of the freaking pool. We are giving them a moment to be invited into the mathematics and bring who they are, their previous funds of knowledge. Remember, that's kind of what we were talking about before. And just using that as the launch pad for any lesson we might, if we need to do some formal instruction, we're absolutely going to do that. But we do it after some inquiry and engagement and investigation.
So that reminds me of something I saw. Graham, is it Fletchy? Graham Fletchy?
Yeah, Graham Fletcher is his. Yeah,
Fletchy.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Fletchy's website. Graham Fletcher. Yeah.
Yeah.
So something I saw him do one time, I think it was at a conference. He called it parallel teaching. And so whenever I think about inquiry based, it's the just in time. We talked about that last week too. The just in time intervention, but the direct instruction comes when you've identified a need in which something needs to be direct instructed. So you could do a parallel example where you step out of this problem with a different problem, different context, but math that you're going to have to apply, provide them some direct instruction with this example, and then immediately say, now that I've shown you this, go transfer this back into the situation. So you're providing them this kind of parallel example at the same time, but you're not giving away the meat and potatoes of the big problem that we're working towards collectively, but you're giving them a little bit of a lifeline to help solidify some maybe misconceptions, or like Dan would say, current conceptions
Yeah.
in their thinking, right? And so anyway, so I kind of think about that as I think about this as well, is how do we use direct instruction with intention as opposed to assuming that they are empty vessels that we are filling all day, every day of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. And in that parallel instruction, I love that phrase. We kind of twist the ratio from, instead of the teacher doing 80% of the talking, it's now the kids are doing 80% of the talking, and the 20% of the time that the teacher is talking, it is dead on. It's nailed. It's exactly what the kids need to hear, because the teacher was spending time watching what the kids are giving them, and then the teacher just responds accordingly.
Yep.
Laser focused instruction. And in that inquiry, what are we doing? We're inviting kids in. We're letting them decide whether they're going to use concrete manipulatives or pictures or objects or strategies, non-traditional strategies or algorithms. We're letting the kids kind of have a voice. We're inviting them into the process of being mathematicians. So I love it. What would be an example of what a teacher could do tomorrow? I'm so springing this up on you right now.
Oh man, I personally love like 3-act tasks. There's a whole website devoted to all kinds of 3-act tasks that we can go try tomorrow that have very clearly defined act 1s and 2s, and just kind of let kids play. My personal favorite is the world's largest coffee cup, 8th grade problem. It's a blast. They get to be like Guinness World Book record keepers, and sort of trying to decide, is this coffee cup the new world record coffee cup? So they're applying volumes, they're applying rates of change, like how long will it take to fill the coffee cup once they have two, so there's a lot of math involved, and it's messy, and they're converting units, and we're using technology. There's a lot of stuff happening in there, but kids respond incredibly well because they can imagine a coffee cup. Right? They've seen the Guinness Book of World Records in their library. Like they can think about these situations because these are things that are related to things that they know about. So we've demystified all of that. Now it's about the math, and the conversations are more directed once they've had some of that contextual understanding.
Fantastic. I was in my brain, I was thinking a little smaller. I love the 3-act task though. That's huge and big. For me, I think it's similar though. It's similar. It's just essentially starting every day with a story, like a word problem, but a story. Just here's a story. When you look at Japanese textbooks, like the most common Japanese textbook out there, used by like, I don't know, 40% of the schools in Japan, every lesson begins with a word problem. And basically it's a thing for the kids to read, get engaged, and then the kids attack it using whatever tools they have at their disposal, whatever funds of knowledge the kids walk into that classroom that day with. The kids attack it, and then the teacher's job is to watch what the kids do and respond with the just-in-time instruction.
Mm-hmm.
But 3-act task is a big version of that. It's like, here's a story, go do it, kids, and I as the teacher will respond based on what you give me. And then so I always tell teachers, take the worst curriculum in the world, whatever, find a word problem from your lesson, whatever lesson you're about to teach. Go to the end of that lesson, grab a word problem, put it on a Google slide, give it to the kids. Say, I'm not going to teach you what to do. You do whatever you need to do to attack this problem. I'll give you a few minutes and we'll discuss it. And I'll provide some just-in-time instruction. There you go.
Yep.
Nothing fancy, right?
And we have lots of those. We never get to them because we're so worried about all of the procedural practice that we need to get so that we're ready for them, right?
Yeah, we have to prepare them on how to. They can't do the word problems until I have taught the hell out of it. It's like we can do that. Hey Cole, this was great.
Yeah.
Anything for the good of the order?
No, just thank you everyone for tuning in, and we look forward. Ed is going to be on our professional learning series in May, so I'm excited about that. Mr. Ed Campos, I'm
Ed
excited.
Campos is amazing. He never fails to just hit a home run, man. He knocks my socks off every time I watch him
He
work.
brings the energy and brings the fun, so I'm excited for it.
Yeah. We should tell people, make sure they subscribe on Spotify or the Apple app or YouTube. And if they watch or listen to our podcast on Spotify or YouTube, they could watch the video portion. But if they watch or listen, I mean, to our podcast on Apple, then they only get the audio. So, if you don't want to see my ugly face, do it through, Apple. But if you want to see Cole's fancy room, office, do it on YouTube or Spotify. I think that's it.
Yeah.
Next time we'll try and get Scott in here. We'll figure it out. All right.
All right, sounds good.
Have a good day.
You too. Take care.
All right, yeah.